Let's talk about variables. Say I wanted to keep something special. I would make use of a variable. Say I wanted to keep a name, okay? Make use of a variable and I'll call it name and I'll be like, okay, name, Python store a name inside it first. And Python, let's say we wanted to store the name will, but if I run the code now, Python doesn't know will, so we have to print it out. So what we do is to print it out, that's very simple. We use this function called print, and then we type in the name of our variable, which is in this case called name. If I said name, let's run that and go. If I said print name, it prints out real for us, which is pretty good. But if I said made a mistake and didn't call on the name of my variable and I used this and I said will, okay, just calling out the variable, my name itself, it's going to tell me that whatever I've typed in here, this value will, I haven't defined it yet. I haven't given it any special meaning. It doesn't make sense to Python, okay? So Python needs to have a way to remember stuff, and the way for you to make it remember stuff is making use of a variable. So that's why if you wanted to call a variable, it remembers only the variable that has a name. So to make a variable, it has to have a name. Not this name, it could be anything. This name could be any value at all. It could be x, it could be 1, 2, it could be 2. We're going to talk about some rules on it, but it could be any word at all, okay? So that's it. And Python is a way to remember the name. And the next thing Python needs is an equal sign, okay? This is called an assignment operator. And then it needs the data value that it needs to store inside. In this case, we are storing something called a string, okay? I'm storing a string for now. And a string is just like a sequence of number characters that are stringed together, kind of like a string. Okay, so not any characters at all. It can be numbers. It could be alphabetical characters, but it's just going to be like in this case we have alphabetical characters. So now to fix the variable error here, we're just going to say name, name. Okay, and we can also override the value of our name. We could say name, and I just have that as name. Let's say name is equal to, let's override the value and say Smith. Perhaps I wanted to have his second name, and when we run that, he only remembers Smith. He doesn't remember the second name. So what we can do is say that give it a name. So in variables, we like to make things that give them names that can actually make sense to us, because Python doesn't really care about the names we give our variables, but make sense to us and make sure that we can use it for something. So in Python, there are multiple ways of making the variable name. Some of the styles we use is, for example, I have an underscore here to denote a space between the names. I could just type in also a name that makes sense to me, okay, here. But there are rules we can have. We can have a number. We can have one coming before name, one name, but we can have something like name, name, and name one. We could have one coming after name. That is to say, we can have a number value coming after name. We can have special characters coming after name, and in some cases, in the old Python, I guess it hasn't updated. We can have like all this kind of prints or special keywords in Python. Maybe like there are some keywords like is. We're looking at that if. We have some keywords like else. We can have those kind of things being variable names because Python recognizes them as keywords. Keywords are words or special words that have its own specific use within the Python language, okay? Within the Python language. Those are what keywords are. So let's stop that for now. So now when we wanted to, if we wanted to print out name again, we always have to be careful as programmers to update our values. If I print name, Python doesn't know anything name because we have changed the first name. We said it's first name and we have a second name. So if we print again, we have another error because now name is not defined in this case. So what we do is we correct that and we put in first name, and now it will give us the first name's value, which is real. Say for example we wanted to print out the second name's value, we can now come over and say print the second name's value, and what will we store as the name of the variable for the second name to call it to the screen? We call it surname, and then we print out the second name's value, and it has given us Will Smith, which is pretty awesome. So variables don't need to store only names alone. They could also store numerical values called integers, for example age, and we could say, I guess Will Smith is a bit older, so I could just say like 52 for now. And remember, if you wanted to get that value actually shown on the screen, you have to print it. So the neat thing with print value is that it can print in any variable out for us, okay? As long as it holds a printable data types. Printable data types in this case would be like 52. Most data types are printable. Will, and we have Smith. Yeah, also all the types of data types like dictionaries, things like booleans, and we're going to be looking at that later on. But as a brief introduction, this one does fairly well for us. So if we run the code now, it says Will Smith and 52. But how about doing something cool? How about doing something? So we can say name. We could have the print function could have its own values inside. Print is a function that by default prints values in the form of characters, in the form of strings to the screen. Remember we said a string is any sequence of characters. So because of that, we have a special thing to do with strings. And we could say name. We could say, hey, print out the value this way, name, and then we can put in a comma after this to separate that we want a different thing. Sorry, we can say name, and then we can say, yeah, surname, and then we're just making a nice formatted output so that when it gets printed out on the terminal, or when it gets built the code for us, it builds it quite nicely with some nice called in a nice way called string formatting. So we put in age here and use a comma to separate after that. So what Python says is, oh hey, this guy wants to print something a bit different. He wants to first have his own values. He wants to print a string value, a surname value, name value. So when I'm printing on the screen, I'm going to print out something as name, and I'm going to print out whatever this variable has stored called first name. I'm going to print out the surname. I'm going to print out whatever value has stored called surname. And then let's stop that and let's run the code for now and see what happens. Name Will, surname Smith, and age 52. So that's how variables work in Python, and we've seen a little bit of the print function. Bye for now, guys.